She murdered her own grandchildren to steal a throne. And for 6 years, she almost got away with it. If you've never heard of Athaliah, you're not alone. She's the most dangerous woman in the Bible that nobody talks about. More ruthless than Jezebel. More calculating than Delilah. And she came closer than anyone in history to wiping out the bloodline that would eventually produce Jesus Christ. This is the story of a grandmother who killed her own family, a 1-year-old boy who escaped the massacre, and the 6 years he spent hiding in God's house while a murderous queen sat on his throne. By the time we're done, you're going to see why this ancient story reads like a political thriller. And you might just recognize yourself in one of the characters. To understand Athaliah, you have to understand where she came from. Her mother was Jezebel. You've heard of her, right? The foreign princess who married the king of Israel and taught him to worship statues instead of God. The woman who hunted down prophets like they were animals and fed them to her idols. The queen who painted her face and looked out her window at a man named Jehu, who'd come to kill her, and asked if he'd come in peace. Jezebel died eating dogs. The dogs of Jezreel ate her body so completely that when they went to bury her, all they found was her skull, her feet, and the palms of her hands. But before she died, she raised a daughter. Athaliah grew up watching her mother run a kingdom. She saw how Jezebel manipulated kings, silenced prophets, and crushed anyone who stood in her way. She learned that power wasn't given. It was taken. Mercy wasn't a virtue. It was weakness. And the throne belonged to whoever was willing to spill the most blood to keep it. When Athaliah was still young, they sent her south. Israel and Judah were 2 separate kingdoms at this point. Sometimes they fought each other. Sometimes they made alliances. And the most common currency for an alliance was a bride. So Athaliah, daughter of Jezebel, was packed up and shipped to Jerusalem. She was going to marry Jehoram, the crown prince of Judah, son of the godly king Jehoshaphat. It was supposed to unite the families. Bring peace between the kingdoms. Instead, it was like injecting poison directly into the royal bloodline of David, the husband who lost everything. Jehoram wasn't a bad man when he started. He was just weak. He was the oldest son, but he had 6 brothers. And he lived in constant fear that one of them might be more loved, more capable, more worthy of their father's throne. He didn't have the courage to seize power. But he had a wife who had plenty. Athaliah watched her new husband pace the palace corridors, biting his nails, complaining about his brothers. She listened to him whine about how their father, Jehoshaphat, had given each of them fortified cities and too much money and way too much influence. She heard the fear underneath all that resentment. And she started whispering in his ear. What if they weren't a threat anymore? What if they were just gone? Jehoram didn't have the stomach to kill his brothers himself. But he had the authority to order it done. And Athaliah had the patience to make sure it happened. The moment Jehoram became king, the swords came out. All 6 of his brothers were executed. Some of the leading officials in Judah were killed right alongside them. It was a purge. Fast. Merciless. And completely unnecessary. The Bible puts it plainly, he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel, as the house of Ahab had done, for he married a daughter of Ahab and did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Jehoram reigned for 8 years. 8 years of watching his wife's influence spread like mold through David's house. 8 years of leading God's people further away from God. He died of a painful, wasting disease. His intestines literally fell out, and the people who buried him didn't even bother to light a funeral fire in his honor. They just put him in a grave and walked away. His son, Ahaziah, became king next. Ahaziah was Athaliah's boy. And he was exactly what you'd expect from someone raised by Jezebel's daughter. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he took the throne of Judah. He reigned for 1 year. He wasn't evil like his grandmother Jezebel. He didn't build altars to foreign gods or hunt down prophets. He was something worse. He was weak. He was easily led. He went to visit his uncle, King Joram of Israel, because family connections were complicated and he wanted to feel like a real king hanging out with other kings. That visit cost him everything. Because at that exact moment, a man named Jehu was being anointed in secret. God's instructions were simple and brutal: destroy the house of Ahab completely. Every man, every child, every ally, every memory. The blood of innocent people was crying out from the ground, and Jehu was God's chosen executioner. Jehu drove his chariot toward Jezreel like a madman. When Joram came out to meet him, Jehu didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Is it peace, Jehu?" Joram asked. "How can there be peace?" Jehu shouted back, "as long as all the idolatry and witchcraft of your mother Jezebel abound." Joram tried to run. Jehu drew his bow, put an arrow between the king's shoulders, and pinned him to the floor of his chariot. They dumped his body on the plot of ground that used to belong to a man named Naboth, exactly where God said it would end up. Ahaziah saw what happened to his uncle and ran for his life. He didn't get far. Jehu's men chased him down, caught him on the road, and wounded him so badly he died before he could reach safety. His servants carried his body back to Jerusalem and buried him in the tombs of the kings. He was 23 years old. Athaliah got the news in her palace. Her husband was dead. Her son was dead. The elders of Judah were already talking about who would be the next king. And Ahaziah had children. Sons. Princes of the royal blood. There were plenty of heirs. Athaliah looked at the empty throne. And she made a choice that would define her forever. What happened next is the darkest moment in the history of the Davidic monarchy. More brutal than anything Saul ever did. More shocking than Solomon's slide into idolatry. Athaliah didn't send soldiers to arrest the princes. She sent them to kill. The massacre started at night, because that's when assassins do their best work. The palace guards moved through the royal quarters room by room, chamber by chamber. They didn't knock. They didn't announce themselves. They just opened doors and went to work. The sons of Ahaziah were boys. Some were teenagers. Some were toddlers. Some were infants, still nursing at their mother's breasts. A sword doesn't care how old you are. It only cares if you're in the way. 42 princes. That's the number the Bible gives us. 42 descendants of David. 42 living promises of the covenant God made with the shepherd king centuries earlier. 42 lamps of the menorah, snuffed out in a single night by the woman who should have protected them. Their own grandmother. Think about that for a second. This wasn't some distant relative or political rival. This was Grandma. The woman who'd held them as babies. Who'd watched them take their first steps. Who'd kissed their scraped knees and told them stories. She looked at those 42 faces and decided they were worth less than the throne she wanted. The chronicler records it in one brutal sentence: when Athaliah the mother of Ahaziah saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the royal heirs. It was the closest the line of David ever came to extinction. Closer than Goliath. Closer than Saul's paranoia. Closer than the exile, the destruction of Jerusalem, the Roman legions, or any other threat that would come later. For one terrible night, it looked like the promise God made to David was dead. The serpent had finally crushed the heel of the woman's seed. The house of David had fallen. And in the morning, Athaliah washed her hands, put on her crown, and sat on the throne of Judah like it had always belonged to her. The woman in the shadows. But there was a room the soldiers didn't search. Her name was Jehosheba. And she's one of the most important people in the Bible that almost nobody knows about. Jehosheba was the daughter of King Jehoram. That means she was Athaliah's daughter. She grew up in the same palace, raised by the same people, educated by the same tutors. She watched her mother whisper poison into her father's ear. She watched her brothers die by her father's order. She watched the house of David crumble from the inside. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that her mother was capable of anything. When the massacre started, Jehosheba didn't run to hide. She ran to the nursery. She didn't know which of her nephews might still be alive. She didn't have time to plan. She heard the screams echoing through the corridors. The clash of steel. The wet sounds of bodies hitting the floor. She ran past the guard quarters, through the service corridor, into the wing where the smallest children slept. And there, in a cradle against the wall, she found Joash. He was 1 year old. Small enough to hold in one arm. Asleep when she lifted him, completely unaware that his brothers were dying in the next room. Jehosheba wrapped him in a blanket and held him close to her chest. Now came the real question: where do you hide a baby from a queen who's already proven she'll kill her own grandchildren? You hide him in the one place nobody would think to look. Jehosheba was married to Jehoiada, the high priest. Her husband was the most powerful religious figure in Judah. His domain was the Temple of Solomon, the house of God, the place where the presence of the Lord dwelt between the cherubim. And the temple had storage rooms. Rooms for grain, for oil, for wine. Rooms for priestly robes and sacred vessels and incense. Rooms that nobody entered except the priests. Rooms that were, for all practical purposes, invisible to the royal administration. Jehosheba carried Joash through the palace gates, across the courtyard, and into the temple complex. She handed him to her husband. "This is the king," she said. "Hide him." 6 years in the dark. For 6 years, Joash grew up in the house of God. He didn't know he was a prince. He didn't know his grandmother had murdered his entire family. He didn't know there was a throne waiting for him, or a queen sitting on it who'd kill him on sight if she ever found out he was alive. He just knew he lived in a big building with lots of rooms, and a kind man named Jehoiada took care of him, and a woman named Jehosheba visited sometimes and held him a little too tight. Imagine that childhood. Playing in courtyards where priests offered sacrifices. Learning the names of the lampstands and the altars. Watching the morning smoke rise from the burnt offerings and asking what it all meant. Imagine Jehoiada, the old priest, kneeling down to meet the boy's eyes and saying, "You are a prince. You are the king. And one day, you'll walk out those doors and sit on the throne that belongs to you." Imagine Joash believing him. 6 years is a long time for a child to believe something he's never seen. 6 years of waiting. 6 years of hiding. 6 years of watching your enemy rule from the palace while you sleep in a storage room. Meanwhile, Athaliah was living her best life. She threw banquets in the palace. She commissioned altars to Baal in the city of David. She appointed her own priests and officials. She collected taxes and issued decrees and sat on a throne that wasn't hers, surrounded by people who either supported her or were too afraid to say otherwise. She thought she'd won. She thought the house of David was extinct. She thought God's promise had failed. She had no idea that a 7-year-old boy was living in the temple, waiting for his moment. In the 7th year of Athaliah's reign, Jehoiada decided it was time. He didn't act alone. He summoned the commanders of the palace guards. These were tough men, foreign mercenaries who'd served under Athaliah for years. They'd followed her orders. They'd kept her safe. They had no reason to turn against her. until Jehoiada showed them the king. Imagine those soldiers, hardened veterans who'd seen it all, looking at a 7-year-old child and being told, "This is your sovereign. This is the son of David. This is the one you're going to fight for." They didn't hesitate. Not one of them. Jehoiada had a plan. A good one. The guards were divided into 3 companies. One company would secure the palace entrances. One company would protect the temple. One company would surround the king himself. Nobody was allowed to enter the house of the Lord except the priests and Levites who'd been consecrated for this moment. On the appointed day, the doors of the temple were thrown open. Joash came out of the storage room where he'd spent almost his entire life. They dressed him in royal robes. They put the crown of David on his head. They placed the scroll of the covenant in his hands. And Jehoiada anointed him king. The priests and the guards and the commanders fell to their knees. The air exploded with sound. Trumpets blared. Singers sang. People clapped and stamped their feet and wept with joy. Long live the king! Long live the king! Joash, age 7, stood at the center of it all and didn't flinch. He was ready. The queen's last scream. Athaliah heard the noise from her palace. At first, she probably thought it was another religious festival. The priests of Baal were always organizing something. A procession. A sacrifice. A feast. She didn't worry about details. Her throne was secure. Her enemies were dead. But this sound was different. It was deeper. It was the blast of silver trumpets. The sound of the temple. The sound of the God she'd spent her whole life ignoring. Athaliah got up from her throne. She walked through the palace corridors, through the gates, across the courtyard, toward the house of the Lord. Her robes swept the stones. Her crown caught the sunlight. She entered the temple complex. And she saw the boy. He was sitting on a raised platform, surrounded by commanders and priests and singers. He was wearing the crown of David, the one she'd last seen on her dead son's head. He was holding the scroll of the covenant, which she'd never bothered to read. He was 7 years old, small and solemn, looking at her. Athaliah looked at Joash. Joash looked at Athaliah. And then the only queen Judah ever had tore her robes. Treason! Treason! Her voice cut through the singing like a knife. The Levites stopped. The trumpets went silent. Every eye turned to the woman standing at the entrance of God's house, her royal robes hanging in shreds, her face twisted with fury. Treason! Treason! She didn't beg. She didn't bargain. She didn't run. She just stood there, screaming, while the guards moved to surround her. Jehoiada gave the order. Bring her out between the ranks. Don't kill her in the house of the Lord. Even in judgment, there was reverence. The temple couldn't be stained with the blood of a queen, no matter how wicked. The guards led her to the horse gate, where the royal stables opened onto the valley. The sun was high overhead, bright and merciless. And there, at the horse gate, they put her to death. The Bible records it with devastating simplicity. She was put to death. No funeral. No monument. No one mourned her. She'd seized the throne of David with blood, and with blood it was taken from her. Athaliah, daughter of Jezebel, queen of Judah, grandmother of the king she tried to murder, died alone and unloved, forgotten by the God she'd spent her whole life defying. The covenant that saved everything, but the story doesn't end with her death. It ends with a promise. Jehoiada gathered the people. The priests, the Levites, the commanders, the elders, the ordinary citizens who'd survived 6 years of Baal worship and terror. He brought them to the temple, where Joash still sat, crowned and waiting. And there, in front of the boy king and the holy God, Jehoiada made a covenant. 3 promises in one. First, the people promised God they'd be his people. They'd worship him alone. They'd tear down the altars of Baal and smash the idols Athaliah had built all over Jerusalem. Second, the people promised the king they'd honor him, protect him, and submit to his authority as the rightful heir of David. Third, the king promised the people he'd rule justly, uphold the law, and walk in the ways of the Lord. Then they went out and demolished the temple of Baal. They smashed its altars. They broke its idols into pieces. They killed Mattan, the priest of Baal, right in front of his own sanctuary. And they restored the worship of God in Jerusalem. Joash reigned for 40 years. He started well. He repaired the temple, which had fallen into ruin during Athaliah's reign. He collected money from the people and used it to restore the holy place. He walked in the ways of the Lord, at least as long as Jehoiada was alive to guide him. But the end of his story is tragic. After Jehoiada died, Joash listened to bad advice. He turned away from God. He let idolatry creep back into Jerusalem. And when Jehoiada's son, Zechariah, stood in the temple court and called him out for it, Joash ordered him stoned to death. Zechariah's dying words echo through history, "May the Lord see this and call you to account." Within a year, Joash was assassinated by his own officials. They buried him in Jerusalem, but not in the tombs of the kings. His legacy, which started with such grace, ended in blood. The bloodline of David, preserved by a miracle, almost destroyed itself from within. What this story means for us. So what do we do with all this? A wicked queen who killed her own grandchildren. A brave aunt who risked everything to hide one child. A faithful priest who waited 6 years and then acted with perfect timing. A boy king who started well and ended poorly. This isn't just ancient history. It's a mirror. Are you Athaliah? You see something that belongs to someone else. A position, a relationship, a reputation, a future. God promised it to them, not to you. But you want it. You want it so bad you're willing to destroy anyone who stands in your way. You tell yourself it's ambition. It's survival. It's what you deserve. But Athaliah teaches us something important. What you take by force, you can't keep. She reigned 6 years. Joash reigned 40. The stolen throne is always temporary. The given throne is eternal. Are you Jehoshaphat? You're the hidden hero. Nobody knows your name. Nobody applauds your courage. But you saw something precious in danger and you acted. You risked your position, your safety, your future. You protected what God promised to preserve. The world doesn't write books about people like you. But God does. And one day, He'll say, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You hid my king. Now come and see his throne." Are you Jehoiada? You're the faithful one. You waited 6 years through silence and darkness and doubt, and you didn't give up. You prepared. You planned. You trained a child to become a king. You waited for God's timing, and when the moment came, you acted without hesitation. Faithfulness isn't flashy. But it's the only thing God rewards. Are you Joash? You're the one who survived when you should have died. Someone else's courage saved you. Someone else's faith preserved you. You were given a throne you didn't earn and a future you didn't deserve. And you started well. You really did. But the question isn't how you begin. It's how you end. Joash ended badly because he forgot the people who saved him. He forgot Jehoshaphat, who risked everything to hide him. He forgot Jehoiada, who spent 6 years preparing him to reign. He forgot the God who preserved his bloodline through massacre and hiding and revolution. When you forget where you came from, you become capable of anything. Even killing the children of the people who rescued you. The king who never forgot. There's only one king who didn't forget. One king who was hidden, not in a temple storage room, but in the obscurity of a small town called Nazareth. One king who survived a massacre, not of 42 princes, but of every male child under 2 in Bethlehem. One king who was preserved by divine providence, anointed by the Holy Spirit, and crowned with thorns. One king who didn't start well and end poorly. One king who started in a manger and ended on a throne, with every enemy under his feet and every promise fulfilled in his blood. His name is Jesus. He's the son of David that Athaliah couldn't kill. He's the rightful king that Jehoshaphat preserved. He's the faithful priest that Jehoiada pointed toward. He's the perfect king that Joash failed to become. And he's still on the throne. 6 years of hiding. 40 years of reign. 3,000 years of history. And the promise still stands, the scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come. He came. His name is Jesus. And he's still waiting for you to crown him king of your heart. So here's the question I'll leave you with, who's sitting on the throne of your life? Is it Athaliah? Ambition, pride, the desperate need to control? Is it Joash? Good intentions that fade when the pressure's off? Or is it Jesus? The rightful king. The son of David. The one who survived every massacre, fulfilled every prophecy, and sealed every covenant with his own blood. Athaliah's throne was stolen. She held it for 6 years, and then it was taken from her. Joash's throne was given. He held it for 40 years, and then he threw it away. Jesus' throne is eternal. He didn't steal it. He didn't inherit it. He is it. I am the root and the offspring of David, he says. The bright morning star. The root means he's the source of David's line. God before time. The offspring means he's the fulfillment of David's line. Man born of woman. The morning star means he's the light that shines in darkness. The promise that dawn is coming. The king who will never, ever be dethroned. Athaliah built her throne on blood. Joash received his throne by grace. Jesus is the throne. Which king will you serve? Like, share and subscribe to this channel.